Dragon's Dogma official design works mostly shows the evolution of the art assets and why the developers went the direction they did. It has development sketches, iteration art, final concept art, and final CGI models. Overall, it's a really good video game art book. This review will cover the quality of the physical book itself, the content of the book, the aesthetics, and the nostalgia evoked by the book. I'll also talk about how it provides insight into the game's development. We start with the book's biggest flaw. It's only available in paperback, at least in English. To me, it's just unacceptable to have a soft cover for an art book. I do feel the need to be delicate with it since it has a soft cover. Having said that, I've handled the book quite a bit and it is still in decent shape. The pages themselves feel thick and sturdy. The book is 8 and a quarter by 11 and 3/4 inches. It has 311 pages. And as for the quality of the images, the printing isn't unusually good or bad. Overall, the quality of the physical book is below average. I would consider it to be poor, but the strong pages offer some redemption. Alright, what's in this thing? Well, there's early and unused concept art, final concept art, and CG renders, which is how the images actually looked in the game. There are some other things, like at the start of the book, there's a number of images that were used to inspire the art direction for the whole game, as well as some that were used in marketing. There's some nice little informative touches throughout the book, like the height chart for some characters. And there's a lot of design images like this great diagram of how the Hydra should look. Has like a cross section to help the people that are making the CGI model. It even describes the size of the scales all throughout the Hydra. As for how it's organized, the book is divided into characters, monsters, weapons and armor, and locales. There's also a section at the start for key art. There are color codes so that you can tell where in the stage of development the art was produced. Early or unused concept art, final or near final art, or CGI images created for the game. This is a really great aspect of the book, and I'd love it if more video game art books did this. It really helps you see how things were developed over time. Most sections start with the finalized art at the start, then the final CGI render, then the design ideas that led up to the final versions. For the most part, it's really easy to find your way around. Is there any writing or insight from the artists and developers themselves? Yeah, all the writing in the book is from the developers. As far as video game art books go, the commentary in this one is exceptionally good. Some art books seem like the developers handed over stacks of artwork and someone slapped a book together, but this book feels much more like the developers were collaborating with its creation. Here's an example of the type of insight offered from the developers. In this part of the book, it talks about how they were trying to design the Cyclops, and they decided that they wanted to base the design on an elephant standing on its hind legs. I thought it was fun to read about things like this because it caused me to look at the artwork in a new way. Many of the design images have commentary about what changes to make, why they're designed the way they are. It's like having a tour guide with you throughout the book, and it adds so much flavor to the experience of looking through the art. And I think they do a good job of describing what they're thinking. Okay, does this book have what you want it to have? Well, there's about 70 pages for the monsters, which I think is great. I think the best part of the game is the monsters, and I'm happy there's a lot of them in here. However, some of the space is taken by showing the different versions of the same monster, which for many of them is simply a palette swap, and that's not really all that interesting. A few monsters, like the Golem, they just have the final images and there's nothing else about how they were designed, which is too bad. Overall, though, there are a lot of details about how and why the designers made the decisions that they did, including on the monsters. It's a really great deep dive into the design process. And for me, it's pretty much exactly what I want to see in a video game art book. There are about 85 pages on characters. The character pages are interesting and have good details, but the NPC stuff is a bit much for me. There are just pages and pages of NPC clothing. 34 pages actually. There's about 60 pages for armor and weapons, which is decent, and about 30 for the locales. The locales and architecture aren't really my thing for this game, but there is decent commentary for them. And if it matters to you, it didn't really much for me. There isn't a lot of exposition about the weapons. Overall, it's a pretty decent spread. I mean, if I had my way, I would like it if there was a bit more on the monsters and a bit less on the NPC characters and the clothing, but that's getting pretty nitpicky and down to personal taste. So, as far as content is concerned, there's a wide variety of clearly labeled art from all stages of development and lots of rich developer commentary. Overall, the content is exceptionally good. Alright, the aesthetics. Well, for the most part, it's pretty average. There's nothing particularly notable one way or the other, but the opening art is pretty awesome. The pages are a softer color than bright white, and it makes it a lot easier to look at the images. And many of them aren't even framed, they're just on the page. I think it matches the overall feel of the game. Are there any full pages of art? Yeah, and I think they're really good. They do a lot to ignite nostalgia. They also show how influential the art assets are in designing the look and feel of the game. For example, some of the key art was used to help the developers get a feel for a party of people taking on a huge monster. And I think the essence of that very much made it through to the final product. Is there anything else that's noteworthy about the book's aesthetics? Well, as I mentioned before, the soft cover is a sin. I get nervous that the binding will break or something, or a series of pages will come loose. The cover has the design of a leather bound book. It would be amazing if it really was. But it's not. On the whole, I would say the aesthetics of the book are average. Does the book evoke nostalgia? Very much, yeah. I found the opening images really interesting because you can see how the developers used the key art to create the game. And it's impressive how well the art captures the feel of the gameplay. I mean, looking at the art is like a trip down memory lane. I also thought it was fun to see all the monsters and the design decisions that went into creating them. It reminded me of my encounters with them. I mean, the whole book is just cohesive and it strikes the same overall feel of playing the game. I think it does a really good job at evoking nostalgia. I mean, I played the game more than 7 years ago, but this book brought me right back. Okay, what kind of backstage info does this book provide? Well, as I mentioned previously, all throughout the book, there's remarks from the artists themselves, including why certain art was produced and their thought process in designing it. But there's also more broad design comments, such as the difficulty in creating numerous versions of something as straightforward as a bow. I think the book also provides insight into the game development process and how the artwork intersects with other aspects of the game design. For example, an artist had an interesting problem to solve. How do you make it look like someone is climbing a horizontal flying dragon rather than riding it? The art would guide the animators to make the in game movements look more like how they're intended to look. I thought it was interesting to think of this problem in the game development process and to see the solutions they came up with. I found an interesting example of how the publisher might influence the artwork that's produced for the game. Here, the art director says, "This is one of the key visuals we had in mind to use when first announcing the game. Since we had almost a year between announcing the game and releasing it, I thought an interesting yet ambiguous image would work well. But you know Capcom, they wanted the announcement to dazzle the public like fireworks with plenty of generous hints to build the anticipation. So my poor little draft was rejected." One last thing for this section. I think this book really helped me gain an appreciation for how the game design choices contribute to the overall tone and feel of the game. For example, what if they went with these design choices? I mean, it would feel like a totally different game, right? It really shows how valuable it is to have some people with a vision of how the whole game should be. There's a comment about how some artists initially thought the armor design was too bland, but I think they were right on. Well, in closing, I think this is a really, really good video game art book. The commentary from the developers and the artists, they set the standard for all other video game art books to follow. Well, different people want different things in video game art books, but I hope this review has been helpful in showing you what you can expect from this book. If you have any complaints about this video, I encourage you to spend your time and contact my customer support center.